All right. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening. I am so glad you are joining us for this session on how to pitch like a pro. This is something we get requests for often, and it's really, a part of building a business that's critical but can feel overwhelming. The idea of how to tell your story in a way that actually resonates with an audience, resonates with investors. And the truth is, a good pitch isn't about sounding impressive or dropping the right buzzwords. It's about making it easy to understand what you're building and why it matters. And so today, hopefully, we can break down exactly how to do that with our guest. Super fortunate to have Will Mercer joining us today, somebody with a lot of experience in this area and can help demystify the pitching process. So I'm excited to introduce Will. I actually met Will at DevConnect last fall and had the opportunity to overhear a session he was holding with builders around getting funding. And I'm really pleased that he's agreed to share his insights with this group as well. Will is a venture strategist who helps top-tier founders clarify their mission, articulate their value proposition, and formulate a growth strategy that drives rapid scale. In the last 12 months, startups he's advised have scaled to 1.5 million users and have raised over 20 million in venture capital. He also leads World Build, an incubator program for the most ambitious founders to create hyperscale products for the world ecosystem. So, Will, a pleasure to have you today. Before we dive in, I'd love to just hear a little bit about your background and what led you into this work.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks. So first of all, thanks, Teresa, for hosting, and a shout out to Atrium for this. Thank you. Great to be here. So yeah, I guess my background is, I guess I made every mistake there is, from being a founder to being a VC to, I've done it all wrong. And so as a result, I've learned a hell of a lot in a short amount of time. And every business I founded has been a community-centric business. So the goal is, how can you get a group of people to work together for a common or shared goal? So my last business was a co-living space in Belize. It's now the largest digital nomad co-working travel business. Before that, I was a VC in London. Again, that's how do you get the community of founders to help each other and grow the portfolio as a whole. And whilst I was in Belize, I reconnected with this technology I'd heard about called blockchain. And I understood that there was this huge potential for pooling resources, for bringing everything together, for networks to align incentives with other participants to create, a rising tide that lifts all boats. And so that's kind of how I started to get into Web3. And then from there, I've just been on a tear. So I'm a core contributor of a DAO called Friends with Benefits. And Friends with Benefits is a community of 5,000 plus creative technologists building in Web3. And most recently, for the last 18 months, I've been working within the World ecosystem to really help bring it to life. And I'll start this session with a small plug for World as to why I care about building in the World ecosystem.
Shall I pop your screen on and we'll let you start that pitch?
Cool, let's go. All right, amazing. So hello, everyone. Really great that you could be here. I just want to say that this session's only going to be as good as the questions you ask. So whether you're on YouTube and you want to leave some questions in the comments, or you're elsewhere, please, the more questions you've got, the better. If you disagree with something I say, even better, right? Like, there's no hard or fast rules for any of what we're going to discuss today. I'm just going to share what's worked and my experience. So yeah, we've already gone a little bit about me, but I spend my time right now trying to work out how we can use World's stack to create the best businesses in Web3. And I'm slightly biased, but I think World is probably the most interesting ecosystem in Web3. But we're in a world full of great blockchain, so I'm also not solely wedded just to that. But I think you guys should take a look at World. That's my biased plug. And so why? Because World has three things that really break through in this age. So the first of all is massive distribution. The second thing is that proof of humanity, so you can have a bot proof network. And then the third is that there are a load of incredible features that help essentially abstract away a lot of the complexity that builders face. So just a quick plug on distribution. World has 38 million users. Sorry, one second, I'm just getting a, 38 million users in the world ecosystem, and of those, we have a huge number, 17.6 million that have been verified as humans. So these are people that they're genuine users. If you're going to do an airdrop, that bots are not going to farm. If you're building user rep scoring, so you want to understand who the valuable users are, you are able to have a rep score. You can assign and identify users in a way that they can't afford your ecosystem. If you want to build a social network, that means that you have authentic humans on your platform, not bots. And we believe this is super important. And actually, for me, I'm an external actor within the world ecosystem. I'm just bullish on what they're building. So, one second. There we go. So, and the other thing about it is the world's growing incredibly fast. 60,000 users last week. 17,000 people got verified. It's one of the fastest growing ecosystems in Web3. So just to reiterate why we think this is great is that you have easy to build on infrastructure, the ability to prove that your users are human and authentic, so you can build authentic products for real people, and then this massive distribution. And this is an example of the growth. This is world's growth over the last few months, and as you can see, we're starting to see hockey stick level stuff. So why world build? Because mini apps are early improvement, i.e. building apps on world work, and then second of all is that we're starting to see established user behavior, and it's growing. So what I do is I run a program for World Build, and my goal is to help builders like yourselves be as successful as they can with the world ecosystem. And so we do that in a program that starts with a hack, or if you've already got an app live on World or in testnet on World, you can apply, and then we'll take the very best for a residential build sprint. We're going to announce next month, but just a heads up, we're going to take at least 10. Last time we took 25 builders to Buenos Aires. This time we're going to go to Seoul. So just to really just shout out that it's a really engaging build week that we do, and then we fly them to San Francisco to pitch to the world team as well as tier 1 VC partners. And the program is really blessed to have some incredible partners that we work with. So anyway, that's my plug for the program. If you're interested, you can reach out afterwards, and we will announce next month. So, we start with the question, like, why are we here? Why do we pitch, right? And I think the most important thing to remember is that a pitch is always a sales process, because sometimes when we pitch, we don't really know why we're here, right? Like one of my early mistakes when I was pitching my own startup is I'd get on the phone with investors and I'd be pitching away, and then they would say, "Hey, can I ask a question?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Like they'd be like, "How can I help?" And like I would just freeze. What I meant to say is, "I need money, give me money," but instead I was, a bit frozen. So just the first thing I'd say is that before we even talk about how to create a big pitch, know what you want from a pitch, right? It might be that you're just pitching a sales pitch. It might be investment. You might even want to onboard, talent. This might be about getting a bigger team. Maybe it's getting more partners in. Maybe it's to get supporters, people to shout about you. But the key thing is, depending on what you want, depends on how your narrative is going to be formed. And the worst thing you can do is, and I've seen this where like I'll be on with someone that I might want to buy stuff from, and what they're pitching with me, their sales pitch to me is actually an investment deck that they've repurposed. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. This feels like an investment deck. If it's an investment deck, it means you're raising money. If you're raising money, it means that you might run out of money. If you might run out of money, I'm not going to buy from you, because who wants to buy from someone that might run out of money in 12 months? So the key thing here is, start every pitch with, why am I here? What's in it with me? What's in it for me? And that extends to programs, right? Like on World Build, if you're doing pitch practice with me, like, why would you, right? The answer is you might want to practice and get your pitch to a good level. So start there. What's in it for me? Always know what you want. So define your objective, how you're going to meet it, that, the usual stuff that you would, but like I would recommend writing it down, because if you write it down, it unmasks any uncertainty that you might have. Second thing about it is understanding where this pitch is going to take place, right? Like environment is everything. So it might be that you're on stage at a pitch deck, pitch day. It might actually be someone's just gone to your website, and your website is a form of a pitch for your business, right? It might be a one-on-one meeting with an investor. It could be, you're sending it to someone to look at in advance. And the reason it's important is you need to make sure that your pitch is right for the context. And I cannot stress that enough. If you're in front of a live audience and you've got slides with way too much information on them, no one's going to read them. Or if you're reading from your slides, no one's going to listen to you, right? So pitches in front of a live audience, generally you want more images, less slides. You want, if you're pitching to, for example, generally from my experience, this is a generalization, but generally older people in business tend to prefer more detailed things. I'm from Europe, right? In Europe, we love detail. In the UK, we love detail. Whereas in America, it's generally like, I just need to know that you've got the detail. I don't need to know the details, right? So depending on where you are, what the culture is of where you're pitching, depends on how much information or detail you want in there. And I can quite happily go into more detail around this. But the key thing is, if you're pitching in front of a live audience, you want to have as little detail on the slides as possible. Why? Because if people can read the slides, they won't listen to you. If you're pitching to a later stage startup, Series A and beyond, you're going to need a lot more information. For example, if you're doing later stage financing rounds, you're probably going to go through a commercial due diligence process where people are going to start looking at your documentation, like your go-to-market strategy or whatever it is. And so, you're going to need a level of detail in some of your pitch decks that professional financiers will want to see. And then, of course, if it's a pitch deck at home, that's something that needs to stand alone without you talking over it. So, one of the most common mistakes you see is someone does a pitch deck to pitch live, they send it to an audience at home and no one really gets it. So, this is a rough rule of thumb, but, if you're doing an elevator pitch, we will, i.e. a short pitch, you need to be able to explain to what you do in 1 to 3 sentences, right? And that might be you're heading to a crypto event and you want to speak to people and get your message across quickly. For public events, generally you'll have 3 to 10 minutes on stage, and the goal is to, generate leads or get collaborators from the ecosystem. And then the dream is that you've got 30 to 60 minutes of an investment's time, right? An investor's time or a sales target's time, right? And that's where you get a chance to really close. But to give you an idea, you need to be able to do these 3 just automatically, just 1, 2, 3, let's go. And so we'll go into how you can craft that. But yeah, I just want to focus on, a lot of people just think, I'll just do a pitch deck and I'll go out and fundraise. But unless you understand the environment and the context in which you are pitching, you are going to fail, right? Bad structure is an unavoidable catastrophe, right? So as long as you position yourself well, you can position yourself well and pitch badly and still kind of get there, right? But you can pitch well with bad structure and you're done, right? So this is why we start here. So then we go into storytelling, which I think for me is the most important thing. And so the first question we ask is, why do we tell stories, right? So I'm going to give you 2 answers as to why we tell stories. So this is what science tells you, that if you have a story, it activates part of the brain that allows the listener to relate to what you're saying. Not only that, but it allows us to align our neural activity in unison, so that we are more susceptible to exchanging words afterwards. And then the third thing about it is that when we hear stories, the brain releases dopamine and it charges. And then the cortex activity, you're processing facts, 2 areas of the brain flare up. So there's loads of neuroscience to say why stories. But the reason I prefer it is, I will kind of share why I sort of got into this. And the first thing is that this is my mother, right? And she comes to me one day, and this is when I was really young. And whenever I was not paying attention, she used to say, "Will, you can't focus on anything. You used to have the attention span of a goldfish." And it just turns out that when I was young, I don't want to divulge my age, but I've been around for a bit, right? I had the average attention span of a goldfish was 9 seconds, right? And I can't even focus for 9 seconds. It's absolutely this is my mother chastising me for not paying attention, whether it was school or whatever it was. Like, I just couldn't pay attention. Well, the human attention span in 1990 was around about 12 to 14 seconds, right? So effectively, calling me a goldfish is basically saying, you can't hold attention like a normal human being. But we've evolved as a species to become incredibly bad at paying attention. In fact, in 2025, the human attention span on average was 8.25 seconds. So I've gone from being someone who can't pay attention to being bloody good at paying attention relative to a goldfish, right? So the average time has decreased, right, from 2.5 minutes to 47 seconds in recent years. This is a separate study that shows our ability to focus. And so stories need to be engaging. And that's fundamentally how we get people's attention. If we're entertaining, I'm able to convey information to you, right? I'm able to go from a little clueless goldfish to a super smart goldfish. And so I could tell you all the science, right? But if we reflect on this lecture, this session in, 10 minutes or 10, sorry, maybe like we have a conversation in a week's time, right? What are you going to remember about it? Are you going to remember the specific points around neurocoupling? Or are you going to remember that actually stories are a great way to get a goldfish to pay attention? I probably suspect that it will be the latter. So that's why we tell stories. Tell a good story. People will not only listen, but they will remember. So how do we make it engaging? Emotion. So when we're pitching or when we're telling a story or a narrative, we want to talk to the monkey brain, right? This is the monkey brain. There was a psychologist called Carl Jung who had a lot of theories about psychology. And he spent a lot of time thinking about the subconscious. And he said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you call it fate. That every human being has an underlying self, and that self guides our decisions. And essentially, that underlying thing is what gets our attention. And I don't want to go too much into modern psychological theory, but there is a part of yourself that we call the monkey brain, or it's sometimes called the child in different psychological schools. And this is the part of you that gets scared watching horror films, even though you know it's not real and it's just on TV. Or when you're on a roller coaster and you're like, right? That is your monkey brain telling you to be scared, even though you know you're safe. And the same thing, like, hey, say you see someone you like and you're like, right? That's your monkey brain. Even though you're a normal human being that's perfectly capable of going up to someone you don't know and say, hey, are you having a nice day? Right? The monkey brain is the thing that flares up, right? But that's the thing that grasps your attention. So when we're pitching, we need to work out how can we get in people's minds and get into the part of their brain that is just really interested in novel solutions. How can we tell a story that's really worth listening to? So this manifests itself that this is something I believe, I don't know whether I have any data for this, but just from my experience, we all make emotional choices and then later we rationalize them, right? And so the goal here is if we can get the emotion to buy into what you're doing, what you stand for while you're pitching on the stage, then we know that our brain will catch up afterwards. Like, why did I buy the shiny red car, right? Probably because I wanted to look cool and I thought it looked really cool, right? And then afterwards, I'll turn around and tell you that actually the engine had 400 horsepower and, the seats were made of like Venetian leather, like whatever, right? That's how we talk about decisions after the fact. So how do we take this story and turn it into a narrative for investment? Well, we have a logic chain, and luckily, the startup industry's been around for, I don't want to say like 35 years, like maybe longer, but we are really fortunate that loads of people have gone before us and basically charted a way to create a compelling story. And it starts like this. One second, I'm just gonna. So we set the stage. Guys, something has changed. I have noticed a problem or an opportunity that no one else has seen. And it's big, right? And it's not just me. This is a huge problem and it's growing. It's only going to get bigger, right? And I'll give you an example of this with World in a second. But I have the solution. It's the best thing in the world, right? I can actually solve this problem, or I can take advantage of this opportunity in a way that no one else has seen. And that gives me a complete edge. And actually, this is what the solution is. This is how it works, and this is why it's special. And it's better than anything else out there, right? No one else is doing it like this, right? I have an edge. And guess what? These are my customers, right? These are the people that are already on board for what I'm after, right? And this is how much it costs to acquire them, or here's some information about how I'm going to get to them. And guess what? It's a massive market and it's growing. So not only are there these customers, but guess what? There are even more people I can help. And on top of that, I can actually charge these people for this solution or this ability or this product, right? And this is how much I charge. And guess what? My customers are happy paying. They really love it. Look, here's some evidence of customers that really, really like us. And you know what? When you take away how many customers there are, how much growth there is in the market, how much money I make per customer, and the fact that I've already got customers on board, this is how much money I'm going to make. It's going to be great, right? And guess what? I'm not just alone in this. I've got some amazing people that I work with. We're absolute rock stars. And this is why we are the people that are able to do this versus someone else. And you might want to say as well, hey, here's some other people that are along with for the ride, and they all think we're going to do it great as well. And here's a timeline of how we're going to get there and what we've done so far. So here's the momentum that shows we're well on our way to getting to where we want to go. And guess what? This is how much money I'm going to ask you for, right? This is what I really, really want. And look at where we're going to go in the future, right? You end on some big, lofty statement that is all about, some big pie in the future. Now, I want to say in this example, this is just an example of how you do it, but generally, this is how one pitch can be structured. You can move parts around, but you generally want to keep all of them. And I'll give you an example now. Now, this is not me. I'm not an employee of World, full disclosure. But World is a really good one because we're here talking about it. And so imagine, I'm here pitching to you guys as, why World. I would say that essentially there was this guy called Sam Altman, and he founded a company called OpenAI, and he saw for the first hand that people could pass the Turing test, that AI could pass the Turing test. So the first time in humanity, we have AI that can pretend to be human and we wouldn't know. And that's a big problem in the future when you want to know that you're speaking to a human, right? So that realized, guess what? This is a problem that's already existing. It's existing on Twitter. It's massive in crypto, airdrops getting harvested, bots on Telegram, throwing elections, whatever it is, manipulating our social spaces. So guess what? Why don't we create a proof of humanity solution that doesn't invade people's privacy and uses a blockchain to give people a sense of their custody of their own ability to prove that they're human, right? And they do this using ZK technology that allows anyone to be able to retain their ability to say that they're human and share it with anyone they want, whenever they want, by just simply giving consent by signing a wallet transaction, right? For the first time in history, we have self-sovereign ID that we know works, or a proof of humanity that's self-sovereign that we know works without having to divulge personal details, right? And when you look at everything else in the market, the US government database getting hacked, Clear's been hacked, you go to the internet, all your passwords have been stolen. Well, this one is different because it's secured by a blockchain and you are in charge of custody of your own ID, right? So unless you're really reckless with your seed phrases or whatever, this is going to be the best way that you can retain your ID. And even then, even if you do get hacked, it's just like any kind of wallet, they can transact on it, but they're not. It's not like you've got this hidden data that they can then pull down from the cloud or from the chain. And you know what? We started all over the world, but we have huge growing markets in Latin America where actually access to financial services is really challenging. But now we're live in over 160 countries. It's a huge market. There are 7 billion, I want to say 7 billion humans alive. And you know what? This is relevant to all of them, right? And the way that we make money is through either integrations of the chain or through transactions on the chain. So for people to use the network for financial remittances, or so on and so forth, this is how they make money. And you know what? People love it. We have more daily active users than most crypto wallets. We think it might be the largest non-financial blockchain user base in the world. And so when you plug it all together, and this is when we get into the financials of world that I'm not party to, but it's a huge opportunity in crypto. And if you look at the team behind it, you've got neuroscientists, theoretical physicists, and obviously the founder of OpenAI. So it's generally pretty good. And all the partners they work with are the best of the best, backed by the best crypto VCs. And if you look at their timeline, they're well on their way to growing exponentially and becoming a global solution. And what comes in the future? A financial network that can provide financial services to everyone across the globe without having to know their specific identity and preserve their privacy. And you can do that independently of government censorship and so on and so forth. So it's the crypto dream being realized by the world. Now, I'm just giving that as an example. Like I hope I don't get in trouble, but this is just my external perception of how I would pitch world to you. But the real reason I say is that there are three parts to it, which is the beginning. We talk about a problem, empathy, right? I can't prove I'm human online. How do I know that I'm dealing with people? Some of us have been, on dating apps, and it turns out that we're speaking to a bot or whatever, right? Like some of us have launched tokens and had bots just steal all the token issuance and destroy my project, right? So maybe you start with the empathy of it's really important that you can prove you're human, because otherwise the internet loses its authenticity. And I don't know about you, but I think the internet's awesome, and I'd rather it was real. So with World, we have this ability to solve that problem. So it's like, what is the empathy? What is the problem that most people are facing, and how do we make it better, right? So we start with explaining what exactly the emotional impact of not solving this problem would be. And then we move on to the business side of things, right? Which is, this is going to the logical brain. So you start off targeting empathy, then you go, but hey, now it's time to rationalize the emotional decision that you just made, right? So here's some statistics and, proof, traction, data that shows that I'm actually pretty on point here. And then you show that we are well on our way to crushing, right? We are going in such a brilliant way that there is momentum, because momentum is how you raise money, right? So just to go back, something has changed. There is some emotional impact, and I want you to help me deliver the solution to the world. And guess what? I'm not just asking from an emotional point of view. There's some really good data and evidence here to suggest that I am actually the right person to do it and that we're going to crush. And guess what? I'm not just saying this like now. We've been working on this for ages. And if you draw a line from where we were to where we go, plus some lofty vision about where we'd be in 10 years' time, we're going to have a really great time. And we're going to be very successful as a business. And also the world's going to be a better place. So empathy, logic, excitement. So, right, we know what the narrative of our pitch is going to be. We know how we're going to weave in our business case to an empathy-based argument. And now we're going to move on to how do we convey that in a material, right? So we know the context, we know the narrative. Now we need the what, the actual thing. So I often get asked, what is the purpose? I don't actually, most people assume they already know, but the actual answer, you can get loads of answers around why do we have a pitch deck. Might be raise cash, communicate a business, fundamentals, assist with sales, whatever. But the real reason is a pitch deck should solely have one goal, and that's to get a second meeting, right? So when we're designing our materials, we don't need to explain the moon on a stick. We don't have to explain the technical aspects. And this is something that technical founders really suck at when they're making decks, which is they're so smart, and all they want to do is tell the world how smart they are. But the world is not ready to understand that. So in order to get a second meeting, what we need to do is distill what you do down to the point where you can get a second meeting, to the point where it is so interesting that I just want to ask you questions, right? And if you have a pitch and no one wants to ask you questions, right, that's slightly it's slightly difficult, because actually what you really want is dialogue with the people that you want to back. So, there's this common thing, it seems really, really simple, but it's not always understood. But investors, they do not invest in pitch decks. They invest in teams, right? And in order to invest in you as a founder or as a team, they need to understand who you are. They need to feel trust with you. They need to feel connected to you. And if they do that, that means they need to spend time with you. So the more time they spend with you, the better. If you're someone who doesn't have rich friends, like it's probably me as well, right? Raising money is incredibly hard, right? Why? Because when you see those rounds of like first-time founders or like founders raising obscene levels of money, right? It's often because the person investing them knows them personally, right? So the easiest way to raise a round is just to be wealthy and have wealthy friends. But not all of us can be extremely wealthy from the get-go. Sometimes we have to go out there and make our own wealth. And so if that's you, which I think is 99.9% of builders, don't lose heart, but just think the goal is not to get someone to look at your deck and give you loads of money, because you don't know anything about them either. The goal is to create a bigger surface for your relationship, to build that relationship. And so your deck is a way of getting them interested in what you are working on. And so the other thing about it is a pitch deck is a measure of how you present information, right? How do you communicate your business and how you understand the value your company provides? And the reason that's really, really important is it's also a test of your ability to be a founder. So when I ran my venture fund, so I was a venture director at a global creative agency. So this wasn't Web3 investment per se, but when I was on the investor side, when you are looking at a founder who's pitching you an idea, right, there are some things that are in your head. And one of them is, can this guy or can this lady raise a follow-on round, right? It's like if I give them money, there's going to be a point in the future where I can't give them any more money. So can this person go out and raise the next investment round? And one of the reasons, or one of the ways I'll be able to ascertain that is, how do they talk about their business? How do they communicate the value? Because if they can get me bought in, then it's going to be really easy for me to get other people to buy in and for other investors, right? And sometimes you'll hear about this as, founder magnetism. So when it comes down to it, we've got to think, right, we've got this material, this deck. This deck is the surface, which is going to build the relationship with the person that I want to either invest in me or buy my stuff or whatever, right? And we know that we've got to communicate clearly. So now we've got to think about how long does an investor spend reading a deck? And I usually do this interactive, so I would ask you and open it up to the floor, but I suspect it's kind of more of a one-way thing. So I'll just give you the answer, right? The last DocSend report, and bearing in mind this is 2023 data, was 2 minutes or 1 minute and 56 seconds, right? For a seed stage deck, right? And that's declined 20% year on year from 2022 to 2023, right? And so what that means is that this is trending downwards. Now, I was surprised it was even 2 minutes. I generally spend 30 seconds on a deck before I work out whether I want to read it again, which means everything you put in your deck that you think I'm going to read, I'm not going to read. There was an amazing Irish playwright called George Bernard Shaw, and he once said, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has ever taken place. And we need to think about that in terms of pitch decks, right? You may think that you are being understood, but I can guarantee you are not. One of my favorite people in Web3 is a guy called Sean Thielen Esparza. He was a founder of a wallet called Genesis, which he successfully exited. And he does a really, really good fundraising process. And his first question to investors when he meets them is, what do you know about my startup? Right? Because he starts the conversation with basically, have you read the deck I sent over, right? Obviously they have to get the meeting, but what he doesn't want to do is waste time covering lost ground. But his first thing is, have you understood what I've sent to you, right? Or because they might be taking the meeting because they like you, they might take the meeting because you're a popular founder in town, and they might not have read any of the materials. So with your pitch deck, the more sparse you can be with information, the more likely it's going to be understood. And the analogy that I use is I don't know whether you've seen them, but in the UK we have these books for children, which are big pictures, small text, and there's one called Spot the Dog, and it is about a dog, right? And the book opens up and it says, the first page is a picture of a dog and it says, this is a dog. The next page, big picture of the dog. This dog's name is Spot. Next picture, dog, Red Bull. Spot has a ball. Next page, the ball is red, right? This is kind of how you want to walk through your deck, right? Is that when I'm designing a deck, I will map out the narrative by just having the title slide for each slide, right? Because every single slide should just have the purpose of getting one point across in the reader's mind. So just to go back into the structure of the deck, 2 minutes to read. What's the average time per slide? 7 seconds, right? So when you put that into context, why do investors give you money, right? They want money back, right? So you've got 16 slides, right? 7 seconds a slide, and you've got to communicate your business, who your customers are, how you solve the problem for them, how you find them, how you make money, how much money you'll make, and why you were the right people to do it, right? It's not a lot of time. So I haven't got time for you to talk about your technical architecture, right? I haven't got time for you to talk about your ROAS from your PPC ads in Q4 last year. What I really want to see is evidence that you're going to crush. So what kind of points are we trying to get across in the deck, right? We want to make sure that you as a team are credible. It's super important. Investors invest in teams. I can't remember it verbatim, but I think Techstars had a mantra where they were assessing startups and there were 6 categories, right? And the first 3 were team, market size, and I think the other 2, right? To give you an idea. So like team is everything, right? You can fund a good team with a bad product. You can't fund a good product with a bad team, right? So that's really important. Second of all is I want to see that you're building something that people want, right? Third is that the market size is big. For a VC to make an investment return, they need your business to be able to scale to $1 billion valuation, which as a minimum will probably be somewhere in the region of 200 to 500 million in sales, right? So I want to see that you have, really comfortable sales. And then I also want to understand what it is about your product that you do that no one else does and why it's different, right? Now, if there isn't a market and you're the first people to do stuff, that means that you're going to come up against behavior change, which is really, really hard. So you need to be articulate what people are currently spending money on that's an alternative to your product. If you're launching your product in an existing market, that's good because it shows there's established consumer behavior. However, you need to articulate what it is that you do differently. Investors see a hell of a lot of decks. I know that I sort of read about 250 decks a year as an investor, probably more. And I was reasonably small fry, right? Like you imagine how many decks, some of the bigger funds have. So your deck needs to be readable in under 2 minutes. It's got to get straight to the point, right? Second thing is it's got to have a loosely prescribed format. Like your deck does not need to be some alt narrative or philosophical treatise on how you solve the world's problems using metaphysics, right? It needs to be a lot like other decks so that you and the investor can just get to the point with the business, right? And then it needs to get to the point quickly. Like you shouldn't have 5 slides of market research. That's a common thing I see. It's like, hey, we did some research and here's what people want. Or a lot of people want to establish something from, first principles. So using the world example I used earlier, it's like, there's this thing called the internet, right? The internet is full of people that interact on it. There's also a thing called AI. AI can pretend to be human. Therefore, internet plus AI equals a need for, right? Like that's too long for an investor. So start as close to the end as possible, right? Start right at the start of where you want to get your point across. So this is just a rule of thumb. You can have different things that you interact with, but generally you need these 10 slides in your deck, and this has been true for the last 10 years. It hasn't changed, so I don't think it's going to change moving forwards, right? But hey, it always helps if you have your startup name, right? Really, really important that when you are pitching at the beginning of a meeting, or if it's a live pitch, your title slide is going to be on the screen, right? And that's free advertising real estate, right? How much would you pay for a billboard in Times Square, right? Quite a lot of money. And when you're in an investor meeting room and maybe there's a screen you're presenting on, or you're online here, right? And you're doing a Zoom pitch, or you're doing a big, startup event, or whatever it is, your title slide is going to be on the screen for a large amount of time. And that is going to be free advertising for you. So make sure that your title of your business is easy and legible. Make sure your tagline actually means something, right? Make sure that you have your name, right? I might not know your name. When you're pitching on Zoom, you have your name, right? It's your chance. Like, I missed something here, but if you saw Teresa's intro when she was presenting earlier, if you saw it said Teresa line atrium, right? Because Teresa is using the real estate of being on a YouTube live session to advertise atrium, and so she should. Mine should say Will-World Build, right? Because what's my goal here? What do I want from this thing from you? Is I want really good builders to apply to my startup program. That's what I would like to get out of this session. But at the same time, a secondary objective is I would love it if you become a more effective presenter as a result, and you're more than welcome to reach out afterwards. So first of all, title, make sure that your name is visible. So I might forget your name, but I can always look back. Second of all, problem opportunity, depends on how you are. Like, most people I've noticed a problem and it's big, right? But it might be an opportunity slide, it might be more optimistic. It might be AI is going to change the way that we plant trees, right? Whatever it is. But you start with defining the way you are. Third is a really clear statement of your product. This is my product, right? Introducing this product. And you don't need to go into too much detail, because remember, this is going to be the first time they're seeing your product. So you just want to say, this is my product and this is what it does, right? The fourth is, this is how my product is different. The underlying magic. Like, what is it that my product does that's different? Why am I able to do something that other people are not doing? What is my moat? What is my edge? Third is the business model. Then it's the business model, right? How you make cash from it. Maybe there's some metrics. Maybe there's some unit economics. I make it for X dollars and I sell it for Y dollars. Then it's how I'm going to get customers, right? What kind of metrics can I show that show that I can get in front of people? Then it's like, who else is doing this? Competitive analysis is less evident in C-stage decks these days, but it's important to have that somewhere, or at least have it in your appendix. But you need to be able to show that you're doing something that is not being done elsewhere in the market. Then obviously the team, financials. You want to show that you're going to make money. You're not just asking for money. And then other stuff. So product roadmap, maybe timeline, maybe any achievements and use of funds, right? So how strict is that order? It's not strict, right? But you need like those, right? So you could have your problem opportunity. I don't like expanding it to 2, but maybe you want 2 slides. Sometimes it'll be, you introduce your product in one slide, you do the magic, or you do how it works in another slide, and then you do the magic in the third slide. Sometimes your go-to-market strategy and traction's different. Like, here's our traction that we've got today. And then the next slide is, here's how we're going to get more customers. So, this is not fixed on those 10, but you need to cover those 10 points, right? So I generally prefer to start with problem opportunity. Then I move to the product, why it's great and what makes you special. Then I go into the businessy stuff. So start with the problem and move to the product. That's the empathy. Then go to market, business model, competitors, right? And you can switch them around, right? It can be business model, go to market, market size, competitors, or you can just mix them up. It doesn't really matter. They don't have to follow prescribed. Then team at the end, and then roadmap. Now, sometimes you're really early on and you don't have much on the business side, but you might be an amazing team, right? And in that case, it's very common to see the team slide at the beginning of the deck. Hi, we did this before, you should listen to us because our team are credible. So if your experience is the most important selling point of your business, because your business is still really early on, then don't worry about it. Like, you put that first. It's really important that somewhere you explain that you're going to make a lot of money, right? Like, so often in the final slide, I say, stuff like, I'm raising X million dollars to get to Y million ARR in the next 18 months. Why? Because it tells investors that I have a really good idea about when I'm going to start making money. If you want detailed financials, so historically you would always have detailed financial forecasts in a deck, but Y Combinator has really revolutionized this. And so, you don't necessarily have to have concrete financials if you're at an earlier stage, particularly in, blockchain where, economics might be a bit different. But you need to be able to speak to them very quickly. So I often put them in the appendix, or I might do just really high level financials somewhere. And it just shows that I have an idea of how to make money. And actually, recent data is suggesting that we're going back. As the venture market starts to shrink, I think we're going to sort of see a return to focusing on profitability, particularly in bear markets. You generally you want to show that you're not going to need constant rounds of financing to get to revenue positive. And yeah, it's just really helpful to have, I'm raising X million dollars to get to Y million revenue by Z date, right? Just really helpful to just really ground the investor. Because if you tell me that you're raising $5 million and then, in 18 months time, you then got to go out and raise 50, it's just like, well, so I'm going to give you money so that you can go out and make more money. Just doesn't really work. And a really good example of this is with Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I think Amazon didn't turn a profit for his first 20 years or something. And Jeff Bezos, every time he was presenting to his investors or doing fundraising, he would turn around and say, look, I can stop now and I can just focus on profitability and we can make money. But if we keep investing and building more of a market share, we're going to have a monopoly and we're all going to be incredibly rich. And he was right. So, if you're going to talk about where you're going, don't talk about it in terms of, hey, I'm just going to need more money from you in, the next 18 months. Instead, be like, right, in 18 months, we're going to get X million revenue, or maybe you're going to break even. And most financial raises are for 18 to 24 months. So, you want to make sure that there's some milestone in 18 to 24 months time that is going to get you in strong footing. This is from the DocSend report. How do the successful decks under their structure look like? So they say, start off with company purpose, which is basically, either your title slide or what you do at the beginning. Why now was a slide that's increasingly common. Like, what is it that's changed? And that's because timing is a big part of people's success stories. So you might want to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is why we think now is the right time to do it. And then you go introducing our product, right? And why now might be your problem slide, right? Or the business model might be your product, this is how we make money. And then, your problem might be, this is the specific problem, my company solves. So this is an example of how you can mix and match. But it still has that thing at the moment, company purpose. This is why we exist. And this is why you should care. It's that empathy thing again, right, that we talk about. Some other points around design and other stuff. When you're doing a deck, no more than 3 statistics a page. Nothing's worse than having too many statistics that they lose relevance. Use icons to remove text. Often you might want to put established brand icons if you've got them as customers or a team member. But the goal is that you really want to do as much visual storytelling as possible, because you're already going to have too much text on the deck. Number your pages. I know some really pedantic people that can't stand slides that are not numbered. And I might say, hey, can you go back to slide 7? And you're like, I don't know which one that is. Remember, free real estate when you have it. So make sure your contact details are on the beginning and the end. And remember, separate deck for live pitching versus investor read at home. And the other thing I would say is an investment process is iterative. So, incorporate your feedback every time you pitch, right? Generally, everyone's going to have an opinion on your pitch. Make sure that people giving you feedback on your pitch are the people that you want to buy. So like friendly investors that can give you feedback, right? Or it might be you pitch, someone asks you a question and it's quite clear that an element of your deck is not resonating. Like maybe they didn't get it. And that's really good feedback that you're maybe not explaining yourself clearly enough, right? So the goal of a pitch is to just keep on growing over time. When you see the best pitchers in the world, it's because they've been doing it for so many years, right? They might have been pitching the same value proposition for like 5 years, right? And that's why they've got good. And so it is iterative. I would say that loads of people are going to give you feedback, and sometimes their advice is going to clash, right? So generally, you as a founder, it's your job to think about what resonates with you with regards to the pitch feedback. I think that's number one. And then number two is that if you're getting feedback, generally if it comes from 5 people, it's probably a good sign that you should incorporate it. But make sure those 5 people are people that you want to invest in you, right? Like you're not getting feedback from your grandma, right? Final bit of advice is keep it simple, like really simple. Simplicity is key, right? I cannot stress this enough, right? Like the mastery of your pitch will be when it's simple. So think about that picture book, that kid's picture book. So to finish, simplicity is key. Use a clear and logical flow, and remember the objective is a follow-up meeting. So we're running short on time, so I'm going to just going to do 30 seconds more, and then we'll open for questions. But the final thing I was going to say is before you pitch, know who is in the room, right? We've never had such a brilliant time to know who we're pitching to. So it goes back to that: know what you want from a pitch, know who's in the room, do your DD on who you're speaking to, so you can find it. And then final piece is remember that investors invest in teams. So the first thing is you want them to be charming. So you walk in the room, eye contact, smile, find some commonality with them. Then you need to present a vision. You need to show that you've got this rocket ship that's going to go to the moon, and that people that they can be the ones to help you, right? And that you are the people that are going to get there. And then you come in with the details and the numbers. And then the final thing is with investors in particular, no one likes to know it all, right? So make sure that if they're giving you feedback, take it graciously and acknowledge their thoughts and whys. Show that it's going to be a two-way relationship. I will stop there and open up for questions.
All right. And we'll see if we can get folks some version of this deck for all the good information in it. But a couple of minutes, we do have to end on time. But if there are any questions, and I'll just drop in this first one. So I see Delian asking, if you have a demo, where do you put that? And maybe the answer is not in there.
Yeah, it's really good. So demos are really hard. So pre-recorded demos often go down like a lead balloon, right? Sometimes they go well. It depends on how good you are pitching. So if I know I've got 3 minutes to pitch and it's on stage, demos, really good idea. So you introduce the product about what it is, and then you would put it there. So problem, solution, so opportunity, problem, right? And then you introduce your product. And then when you do, you can either do how it works in your deck, or you can do a demo there. But if it's a pre-recorded video demo, and if you're on stage and you've got 3 minutes, then it's great, right? Like, because you know that you're in control of your time. But like, if I put on a demo and I'm in a room with investors and I'm sitting there watching a video nervously as these investors are just like, it's really awkward. So, but if you've got a live demo, great. Or if you're like with an investor and you're really confident in your product and you know it's going to wow, then sometimes you just go, hey, why don't I just show you, right? And then you're already talking about it. And if I'm pitching to an investment group, like if it's one investor, again, then gives me a chance to sit next to them, which is really good at breaking down the boundaries, and I can start to form that relationship. Like, hey, let me show you. Here's my demo, right? So depending on the format of your pitch depends when a demo is appropriate. But generally, I put it after you've introduced your product. If you are going to do pre-recorded, just try and keep it short. You haven't got time to go into too much detail, right? So try and keep just the salient points around your demo. If you can do a live demo and get away with it, it really, really works. But then also, it can go wrong. So just make sure your info is there. If you are going to do a live demo and you are on stage, get there early, do a tech test, have a backup recording in case it messes up, right? If you're pitching at an event where you're switching out laptops, then like practice plugging in and plugging out because if your demo goes wrong on stage, you kind of lose the momentum of your pitch and it kind of kills your vibe. So that would be my advice to you.
Amazing. And then so that we make sure we get it in there, I do have somebody asking, another Will, in fact, how do we...
Yes, Will. There we go. I'm on Telegram. I just got a new one. So it's at Will's MER. So at Will, Will, and then SMER. So like Will's Mercer, but with like the bit missing. LinkedIn, I can share my details afterwards. Or you can go to worldbuildlabs.com and send me an email or something. But yeah, I would say find me on TG.
And I just dropped it in there, hopefully correctly. Will's MER. Any one final question from anybody in the chat? Otherwise, I'll ask kind of a good. Actually, I see one more question. This will be the last one we take. So, first-time technical founder living in Nigeria. Is it necessary to have a functioning project before you pitch? Yeah.
I mean, there's no rule of thumb to what works and what doesn't, right? The easiest way to raise investment, as I mentioned earlier, is have wealthy friends. I know that for most of us, myself included, that's actually quite hard. So if you are going to be pitching, think about, in crypto, we have a lot of grants. So we're really lucky to have a lot of grants. In Nigeria, you have the MiniPay ecosystem, which is an OP chain, right? Well, operating on Celo. Like, it's quite easy to vibe code an app and ship it. So if you are going to pitch, you really need to have evidence it's going to work, right? Like, there's so many, investors will generally give you money after you need it, right? So you need to have really strong data to show that it's going to work. And the thing is that we live in a world where you can vibe code a product pretty easily. The second thing is you can evidence demand, right? Really easy. So, back in the day, you just create a fake website and get people to sign up. And that's what I've done before for startups that I've got funded is, prove that you have a really healthy pipeline. So there's no hard and fast rule. But if you're a first-time founder that doesn't have strong investor connections, but you have really good evidence, like get out there and make sure that you've got some sort of wow traction. Like a really good example is like if Mr. Beast comes to me saying, hey, I want to start a bank, I'm going to be like, listen, mate, you've got no chance. You don't know anything about finance, right? So what does Mr. Beast do? Go out and build like 150 million followers across the globe and then raises money to buy a bank that already exists. And now I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Mr. Beast, you've got it, right? So like it might be, if you don't, a really good example, I had some friends have an amazing co-working space in Istanbul. And all they did is they just started organizing meetups to the point where they had 900 people come to their meetups. And they're like, yo, who wants to come in and be a member of our co-working space that we're going to build? And they were like 10x subscribed. And then they went to some real estate investors and said, yo, I've got 900 people that want a co-working space. We need a bit of money to raise to launch a co-working space for like 30 people, right? Can you give us the money? And it was really straightforward. So if you are in that situation where you need money to develop or build, maybe you can build your customer group before you build your solution. I hope that helps.
Amazing. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Will. There was just so much good content in this. We will do a recap thread and break some of this down for folks. And obviously this will be live for you to review, or this will be recorded for you to review on YouTube for anybody who wants to go back through. But a huge thank you, Will. I hope that we see some builders come to build with World Build for the next round, and we'll do a little bit of plug once those applications go live again. But a huge thank you so much for your time and your insights. Super valuable. So
cool. Thanks to you and this for hosting, Teresa. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for listening in. Please do reach out.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Cheers, guys. Awesome. Okay.